name is Jamie Gilligan. I'm from Dublin. My screenplay is called What About Chris? It's about this young man who is attending his uncle's funeral. His name's Ryan and his uncle's name is Chris, and his uncle was a man who was kind of on and off drugs his whole life, and he meets various people at the funeral who some knew his uncle very well, some didn't. And in between this, he kind of reminisces on a weekend he spent with his uncle when he was 10 years old, when his uncle was sober. And the story is really about how when someone passes away, different people have different perceptions of them, and they all remember them in different ways. Yeah. Obviously, writing a character who has a drug addiction problem is, it's a serious topic, and the story is not really about him and his addiction. It's more so like kind of his backstory. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like focusing in on that, because I don't really have an experience with that myself, so I wouldn't feel like it's my place to like write about that. It's more so about like how people remember him. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like focusing in on that too much and writing about something that I don't know that much about, and just kind of keeping it to how the main character kind of struggles with how people remembered his uncle, rather than just making it about his drug addiction. I'm always making changes. I've been thinking about it again recently and thinking maybe we kind of see his uncle at various stages throughout his life, how he ended up where he did. Maybe in another version of the story, he gets a lot older, because he dies kind of young in the story. So maybe just exploring him a bit more throughout his life, rather than just focusing in on the one weekend that they spent together. But I think with any story, there's like a million different ways to go with it, and it's always such a hard decision to decide like which one to go with, because you always feel like you're missing out on an opportunity to explore a different angle. So if I were to go back, there's probably a million different ways that I would do it. I've been at, and as I'm sure a lot of people have, at a few funerals. I've always noticed that there's like a real contrast between like, you'll see, the immediate family of the person who's passed, and they could be having like the worst day of their lives, and then you'll see like people who are kind of there, maybe a distant relative or something, and they're there to kind of show their face, and they can be like having just like casual conversation with people, rather than people closest to them who are obviously having a completely different time. And I just think it was interesting to explore how when you have a funeral, there could be like 100 people there, and how many people actually knew the person and were close to them and were like really affected by their death. In an ideal world, I'd love to direct it myself. I'm just kind of throwing it out there to festivals, seeing where it goes really, and I'll probably end up going back to it and changing a million things in the script again. But like in an ideal world, like I'd love to get it made. If I could direct it myself, that would be great, but if it just got made, like I'd be really proud of that. It's the end scene, and it kind of cuts between when he's 10 years old, spending the weekend with his uncle, and when he's at the graveyard, and it kind of cuts between he's watching his uncle's coffin get lowered into the ground, and it kind of goes out of view, and like that's kind of the last time he sees anything of his uncle. And then in between that, we cut to he's at the beach with his uncle, and he's stood on the sand watching his uncle go into the water, and his uncle like swims out further and further, and as the waves kind of rise and go down again, he kind of falls out of sight. And it's like it was the last day he spent with his uncle for that weekend. And I just think like the way the two connect is like a really good image. and I just thought it was a really nice way to end the script. So yeah.
A few years ago I went to a funeral of my cousin, his father, who died. And his father, we never really knew, he was sort of always at home or working. And so we sort of didn't know him, but we liked him. But at the funeral, my cousin, as we were at the bar drinking pints as you do, told me that for all of his life, his father had been a gambling addict. And the reason they had to move is because he forged his wife's papers on their house, so they had to sell. There's a story that was all made about why they'd sold. That he'd made all his children take out loans for him. And then when I got back home, I said to my mother, "Did you know that about him?" And she said, "Yeah, we all knew that about him." So the family had chosen to override a lot of things for the sake of status, keeping secrets in. And I'm just interested in your views over the two parallel lives of your character, or with the addiction versus what he knew as 10. I'm just interested in your thoughts about how overriding the bad after death, as often happens, as to whether you think that is a positive or a negative thing.
That's a really good question. I think funerals are kind of, they always say they're like a celebration of the person's life. So I think it's always worth like acknowledging the faults of the person. Like there's no point in just, you know, completely making up something and saying they were like this and they were like that. So they, like you said, the gambling addiction, like these things should be acknowledged, I think, but when they're gone, I think you should kind of look at the good things, and not be dishonest either, but just kind of, you know, remember the nice things about them. And it's hard, like there's always two different people in my screenplay. A lot of the people who were at his funeral didn't know him, and they have kind of a negative outlook on him, whereas the main character, Ryan, he really got to know the person, and he said, no, there's someone here that's more than just his addiction. So like there's so many facets to every person. So I think, yeah, like they should be acknowledged, but at a funeral, when you're saying your goodbye to somebody, you should say, okay, we'll send them off in a nice way, and you know, we'll let them go.
Thank you very much for joining us and doing a Q&A on your script. Thank you very much.